Well, thank you. Good morning. Like Scott said, my name is Ben Foote. I am very honored, very excited to be here with you this morning. I know you know very little about me. I teach here and there at a church called Flatirons Community Church, which is, nice. That's based out of Lafayette, Colorado. Few quick facts about me before we get started. I'm 37, even though I look like I'm 15. I will take any advice you've got on how to turn 40 without having a midlife crisis, because I feel mine brewing. I've been a pastor for 12 years. I live out in Dacono with my beautiful wife, Allie, and our 3 kids. Random facts, I am an avid collector of hot sauces, and I am a diehard Cleveland baseball fan. And the combination of hot sauce and Cleveland sports fan just means that I enjoy suffering. You'll get to hear a little bit more about my story throughout this message, but after this, I'll be hanging around, and I'd love to meet all of you, so please don't be a stranger. Please come and say hi. One thing that I want you to hear from me right off the top is that one thing I love about your church is if you come and if you're here for any bit of time, you're going to hear at some point this very specific phrase, and the phrase is, "It's okay to not be okay." All right? I love that because there are so many churches out there where it's not okay to be not okay. And it's very special to have a church that thinks that and lives that way. And I believe it's special because that's how Jesus operated with other people. It was okay to not be okay around him. Like he's not asking for your perfection. He's really not, He's asking for your life. He's asking for all of it, and that means he's asking for the good and the bad and the ugly. It's okay to not be okay with Jesus. And if maybe you're new here and you're like, is this place legit? And is it genuinely okay for me to not be okay? Let me try to prove it I'll go first, okay? Because today I'm going to be very honest and vulnerable with you about some of my own brokenness. So let's get started today. Today I want to answer a question, and the question is this: what does it look like to take a step of faith? All right, that is something that as Christians we know we're supposed to be doing. We hear it. Sometimes we maybe even say it. It's like we're supposed to be taking steps of faith. But half the time, honestly, we have no idea what we're talking about, right? Like we don't know what that looks like specifically. How am I supposed to take a step of faith? It feels too abstract, basically. Right? So what does that look like, taking a step of faith? Am I supposed to read my Bible more, or am I supposed to pray more often? Or are we supposed to do what my church that I grew up in told me I was supposed to do? Are we supposed to start wearing WWJD bracelets and burn all of our Led Zeppelin albums and watch only Kirk Cameron movies? How are we supposed to take a step of faith? That's the question that I want to answer today. And the best way I know to answer that question is to tell you 2 stories. All right, one is a story from my life, and then one is a story from the life of a man named Naaman. All right, we're going to start with the man named Naaman. Okay, Naaman is a dude in the Bible who he gets looked over a lot. His voice is one that we rarely hear from and learn from, and I think it's mainly because his story is really short and sweet. It's kind of tucked into the Old Testament, so it's really easy to just kind of breeze right past it. But not today. We're not going to breeze past it. We're going to look at the life of Naaman. If you want to follow along in your Bible, or if you got the Bible app on your phone or whatever, we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 5. If the Bible's still pretty new to you and you don't know where that is, that's great. I've got a trick for finding 2 Kings. You open your Bible randomly to anywhere and hope to get lucky. Then if you don't, you just go to the table of contents and you look for 2 Kings. Okay, so this is Naaman's story. It starts in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1, and it starts like this. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram, and he was a great man in the sight of his master, highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. All right, first verse, we get some context for our story. And the context is that Naaman is the supreme commander of a nation called Aram, and we learn that Naaman is a top dog. Okay, this guy is a stallion. He is stacked like a series of W's for the nation of Aram. Naaman is highly respected, highly esteemed. He's accomplished. He would have been world famous at this point in time. Everyone knows the name Naaman, and you either love him or you fear him, but everybody listens to this guy. At the same time, though, we learn he's suffering from leprosy. Okay, leprosy is a disease, still exists today. It slowly rots away all of your flesh. It's a miserable way to die. Back in Naaman's day, there was no cure for it, unlike today, and it's highly contagious. So back in Naaman's day, if you get leprosy, I mean, you're locked in a room and no one talks to you until the day that it inevitably kills you, because no one wants to catch leprosy. Okay, so the context that we get is that Naaman is this highly respected man who is now suddenly desperate for healing. Okay, next verse. Now bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. And she said to her mistress one day, "If only my master, Naaman, would go and see the prophet who is in Samaria." That's a portion of Israel. He goes, "He, the prophet, would cure Naaman of his leprosy." Okay, one more time out for a quick history and geography lesson. I promise I'll be quick. I promise it's worth it. Israel, which is the nation where the Israelites, God's people, live and worship. The nation of Israel on its northeastern border is the country of Aram. It's in modern-day Syria. This is where Naaman is commander. In a different book of the Bible, we learn that right before this moment that we're reading about today, shortly before this, in the recent past, Aram invaded Israel. Israel fought back, whooped up, pushed the Arameans out of Israel, and then the king of Aram begged Israel for a peace treaty, and Israel greenlit it. The point being this: Israel is one of the few nuts that Naaman, as a commander, can't crack. Okay, Israel is going to always be a reminder of one of Aram's humiliating defeats. Now, ever since that defeat, even though there's a peace treaty, there are still border skirmishes between Israel and Aram, because these two nations are mortal enemies. And in one of those skirmishes, as disgusting as it is, Naaman is rewarded one of the ancient spoils of war, a brand new Israelite slave to serve his wife. But then this new servant of his makes this insane suggestion. She says that Naaman should go back to visit the prophet of Israel and ask to be healed of leprosy. And the point that I'm trying to get to with all of this history and geography and all of this context is that suggestion would have been absolutely humiliating for Naaman. Humiliating. The suggestion is for Naaman to walk into Israel, the one nation he's not tough enough to conquer, and then beg for Israel's prophet to heal him from one of the diseases that everyone at that time knew was impossible to cure. Naaman is being asked to walk into Israel as a literal loser and then ask their prophet to do something that is literally impossible. It would have been embarrassing, would have been humiliating. At the same time, though, like we talked about, Naaman is desperate, and he's desperate for healing. And so he figures, what else do I have to lose? What the heck? I'll go. He packs his bags, he travels to Israel, he gets to the door of the prophet, and this happens next. Skipping down to verse 9. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots, and he stopped at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." Okay, Elisha. Elisha is the prophet of Israel that Naaman has been looking for, and Elisha is a wild card. This dude is unpredictable if you go read other stories about him. In fact, a few chapters before this story, we learn that Elisha's out for a morning stroll. He's going on a walk. Some guys make fun of him for being bald. He turns around, he calls a curse down on their heads, and when he does that, a bear comes out of the woods and wrecks these guys. He's a wild man. That's why if you want to tease Scott, your lead pastor, about being bald, that's fine. Don't do it in the woods. you never know. Anyway, okay, so picture this moment from Naaman's point of view. Okay, Naaman, he goes to Israel in style. He's got horses and chariots. He went and bought a new suit, the whole 9 yards. He pulls up to Elisha's house, and Elisha won't even step out for a handshake. Instead, he sends a messenger to go talk to Naaman, world famous Naaman. And then to make matters worse, this messenger goes up to Naaman and he goes, "Hey, the secret to being healed, the miraculous cure for your leprosy, is to, drumroll, go and take a bath." It's embarrassing. It sounds like a prank. And so Naaman, his pride is wounded and his reputation feels smeared and his ego is disintegrating. And so he gets furious. And to sum up the next few verses, we won't read all these together, but he starts ranting and raving to his servants. And he basically says, I thought at the very least Elisha would come out of his house to meet me like I'm famous. And then on top of that, I thought he'd do something really powerful because I'm a powerful person. I thought he would have a magic wand or, do some miraculous cure. Instead, he tells me I've got to go take a bath. Like, who does this guy think I am? Like, does this guy think I'm stupid? And essentially he goes, this prophet is a manipulative wild card who's trying to embarrass me. I'm out of here. And he storms off. Luckily, Naaman's servants tried talking some sense into him. Look at this. Verse 13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? Of course you would have done it. Right? But how much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? In other words, Naaman's servants know that Naaman is dealing with wounded pride. That's it. And so they call him out on it. And they basically go, hey, Naaman, dude, come off your high horse. Right, if the prophet told you to do something that would make you look great to be healed, you would have done it in a heartbeat. Right? You're a fighter. If he told you need to go conquer more territory, you would have done that. That makes you look great. That makes you look powerful. If he told you to pay him a lot of money, you're rich. You would have done that. That makes you look powerful. But because he told you to go take a bath in a dirty river, you're suddenly above that. This is important for today, so catch this. They basically tell Naaman, you are passing up your only opportunity to be healed just because you're too proud to humble yourself. These dudes have cojones to talk to Naaman this way. And what's crazy is that Naaman listens to his servant's wisdom. He goes and decides to wash in the river. And so one more time, picture this from Naaman's point of view. Naaman is in the nation that he was too weak to conquer. He's taking advice from a prophet who's too busy to come and see him, and he's about to go wash in the dirtiest river in town 7 times like a common beggar. And then this happens. So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times as the man of God had told him to do, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Listen, the minute that Naaman quit worrying about what other people think, quit worrying about like his own social status and his respect and his ego. Like the minute that Naaman chose to swallow his pride and humble himself, he was healed. Not only was he physically healed, but his soul was healed too. Like if you go read the rest of the story, which you should go do later today, the end of the story is that Naaman ends up putting all of his faith in the God of Israel. Then he moves back home and he becomes an influential follower of God in the foreign nation of Aram. That's how the story ends. Now, what does this ancient history lesson have to teach us today in 2023? Here's the thing I think we got to catch. Okay, all of this transformation, all of this healing in Naaman's life began in a very specific way. It began when Naaman finally became so desperate for healing that he chose to swallow his pride and humble himself. And I believe that is where every step of faith begins. I don't care who you are or where you're at, all right? If you're like just on the brink of like deciding to follow Jesus, this is where it starts. If you followed him for years and years and you're like, but the relationship feels stale and you want more, it starts here. Every step of faith begins with humility because healing always begins with humility. And so if you want to take a step of faith today, here's a question I would challenge you to begin asking yourself now while I move on to tell our second story. The question to ask yourself is, am I passing up an opportunity to be healed just because I'm too proud to humble myself? Start asking yourself that now. Okay, that was Naaman's story. Naaman's story hits close to home for me because over the course of the last year, God has been teaching me a very similar lesson, and I want to share it with you. Okay, unlike the church I usually teach at, you don't know me, so I got to give you a little bit of background on my story. For years and years, for like 2.5 decades, I adamantly fought against God. All right, I grew up in a church-going family, and by the time I was old enough to kind of think for myself, I was like, I don't want anything to do with this faith over here. And looking back, I could see it was because of my pride. Right? I just thought I was too smart, and I'm too refined, and I'm too postmodern or whatever to like need what I thought at the time was the intellectual crutch of a God. right? I thought that God and Jesus were fairy tales that humanity created because they're too weak to cope with the fact that we're all going to die one day. Like, when people talked faith with me, I was a real peach to be around. But at the same time, I was always intellectually pure about the thing. And what I mean by that is I didn't just toss it. I studied up. I started digging into the Bible for myself because I wanted to prove for myself that Jesus is a hoax. I wanted to prove for my poor family who were still Christians that they don't need Jesus. And so I did what I called research. I dug into the Gospels, especially for like 10 years. I dug into the Gospels trying to prove that it was like all a hoax. And then what happened in the end after years of this was instead God totally broke me. I will never stop thanking him for totally breaking me. Like he humbled. See, that clapping, if you're new, just means he broke lots of people in here, and you're welcome here. He humbled me to the point where I couldn't deny him anymore. And so, like about 14-ish years ago, I'm sitting in a coffee shop in Lafayette, Colorado. I finally pray for the first time in a really long time. I'm crying in this coffee shop by myself. I probably look like a crazy person, and I pray to Jesus, and I'm like, there are so many questions I have about you. I don't even think I'll get answers to most of these questions this side of heaven. I can't totally understand or explain you, but then somehow at the same time, I believe in you, and I trust you, and if you could please fix me, I will do anything. I'll do whatever you want. You can do anything you want with my life. If you could please resurrect me also. And ever since that moment, for the last 14 years of my life has been a whirlwind of spiritual healing, right? Hear me, please. Am I perfect? Absolutely. No. If you got to know me really well, you'd be like, dude, you're not even remotely close. I'm not perfect. The last 14 years of my journey with Jesus have also included addiction and self-hatred and self-harm and depression. At the same time, I would never characterize the last 14 years of my life as a story of addiction and depression and self-hatred. I would characterize the last 14 years of my journey with Jesus as healing. It's been the primary theme of my life, right? Basically, am I there yet? No, I'm not close. Am I on my way? You better believe it, right? Okay, that's like background on me because you don't know me, okay? Because God is still good and good to me and loves me, he continues to humble me and teach me new things, all right? And during a 2-month sabbatical that I took about a year ago, he began revealing a new thing that he wants to heal in my life. And it all happened during this solitude retreat that I took. And I want to share this moment with you. So this is about a year ago. I head up to a cabin all by myself for 3 days and 2 nights, just me and Jesus. Honestly, it went like every other solitude retreat I've ever taken, which honestly, it just means I sit around in silence and I feel nothing except for strangely, ravenously hungry all of the time. I'm not very good at the solitude retreat thing. I'm like too ADHD for it. And so I'm up here on the solitude retreat, and it just eventually became me sitting around wondering what in the world God wants to do with my life while quietly eating like boxes and boxes of hot and spicy Cheez-Its. And so day 1 goes by, I feel nothing. Day 2 goes by, I feel like I'm learning and feeling nothing. Day 3 shows up, it's a half day. I just decide I'm going to start reading something because I'm bored out of my mind. And I had brought this little book with me, tiny book, you could read it in one day. It's called With Open Hands, and it's a book about prayer written by one of my favorite Christian authors. His name is Henry Nouwen. You should read this book one day, With Open Hands by Henry Nouwen. All right, I pull it out, crack it open because I'd never read it before. And in the introduction, Nouwen explains why he gave it the title With Open Hands. And he explains that there are areas of all of our lives where we have what he calls clenched fists. These areas of our lives that we want to keep total control over. We're too scared to let them go. He says that everyone has something like this. So this could be your career or your bank account or your sexuality or the respect that you feel like you've earned or your anger or your hatred. This could be the secrets that you're keeping so that you can continue managing your identity. You name it. There are just certain areas of our lives that we do not want to let go of them. Okay, we're basically telling God, it's like, you can have any part of my life that you want except for this over here. I don't trust you with it. And then Nouwen explains that you can't truly begin praying until you unclench your fists and open your hands and give that thing to God. And basically tell God, like, I'm scared and I don't know what you're going to do with this thing over here, but yes, you can even have this part of my life that I've been keeping from you. Okay, I'm reading this. up at the cabin. Honestly, at the time, I'm just kind of going like, yeah, that's nice. I took a little note. Like, that's a good point. I could maybe teach on that one day, which is funny because that's what I'm doing right now. But in the moment, I was reading it from a cold and distant place, right? I'm just a pastor looking for things maybe I could teach in the future. Okay, but then the chapter ends, and it ends with a written prayer that you can pray to God if you'd like. And I'm like, what the heck? I'll pray this thing out loud. And so there I am, alone in the woods, and the first time I've spoken out loud in 3 days, it is this prayer, which goes like this. Dear God, I am so afraid to open my clenched fist. Who will I be when I have nothing left to hold on to? And who will I be when I stand before you with empty hands? Please, God, help me to gradually open my hands and to discover that I'm not what I own, but what you want to give me. And what you want to give me is love, unconditional, everlasting love. Amen. And I prayed that out loud at this cabin, and God absolutely breaks me again. And I start weeping up at this cabin, and he taught me something new. And some of you have experienced this, so you know what I'm talking about. I didn't hear an audible voice, right? It's more just like this foreign thought popped into my head. It's like something that I'm not wise enough or discerning enough to have thought on my own power. And what he started to teach me was that ever since I was a little kid, I've always wanted to do something important. I can remember thinking this as early as like 5 or 6 years old. Okay, I'm a musician, so it used to be music. Like, I want to make important music. I went off to school. I studied English. I became a writer. It's like, I'm going to write important stuff. Then God wrecked my world, totally turned my life around. I became a pastor, and it was like, I want to do important ministry. I want not just any ministry. I want to do ministry for people who are wandering and lost and confused and broken. It's like, I want to do something important. And at the core of that passion, I think at the core, it's honorable. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do something of lasting value with your life. But at the cabin that day, what God started to teach me was that somewhere along the course of my life, I had taken the idea of doing something important and I had distorted it into the idea of being viewed as someone important. And the truth is that doing something important and seeking to be viewed as someone important are in direct opposition to one another in the kingdom of my God. Right? And so I prayed that prayer, and God let this truth about me come into full focus. It felt like I had been staring in like a foggy, steamed up mirror for years, and then he just wiped it clean, and I can see who I really am, and I didn't like what I was seeing, and it hurt, and it wounded my pride. Because honest to God, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am if I'm not the guy who's trying to be important all the time. That's been over 30 years of my life. And so it hurt, but then even though it hurt, it felt like so loving of God to reveal it to me. He didn't seem like he was mad. He didn't seem like he was disappointed. It just felt like God was going, hey, Ben, I really love you. And so I need to tell you some truth because you can't keep living this way. It felt like God was going, hey, Ben, this is the leprosy in your life. All right, this is the thing that will rot away at you. This constant drive and perfectionism and the need to prove yourself and the desire to be viewed as someone important. It's going to eat away at you until it ruins your soul. And then I started to hear the words of Jesus in my head at this cabin back when he said, he's like, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life, if you want to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, and if you want to go find something over here to find your own pride and identity in, if you want to save your own life, you're going to lose it. But whoever loses his life for me, if you let go of the things that you're seeking pride in and let go of the secrets that you've kept and give them to me, you will find life. And God was revealing to me the humbling truth that even though I had always considered myself humble, most often I'm honestly just insecure. And the two things look so similar, but they're worlds apart. Humility is fearing God. This means that you only care what God thinks. You only seek to please him. Insecurity is fearing people. You're terrified about what other people think about you, so you're always seeking to people please. And God taught me that even though I think I can say in integrity that I never did this intentionally, but even though I never intended to, I had started to find a lot of my worth and my value, maybe even all of it, in being on staff at Flatirons Community Church. Because the truth, and I'm just being honest and vulnerable with you right now, this is not every pastor, but it's a lot of pastors, right? it was true for me at least. The truth is, being a pastor at a very large church is a very quick fix for an insecure person who needs to feel important all of the time. And there's still a part of me that's embarrassed to admit that. I'd say, honestly, most of me now is just like relieved anytime I get to confess that to other people who follow Jesus, because I had started down a path that I know it ends in destruction and it ends in humiliation. You've seen it. We've seen it ruin countless pastors' lives all over the country, all over the world. I was seeking for ministry, my job, to define who I am. It would have eaten away at me until it ruined my life. The cool thing was that God chose to humble me instead of humiliate me, because he's really good, I promise. Like, even when his goodness hurts, he's really good. And so I drove down that mountain from that solitude retreat. I felt like washed clean. And I've been praying I prayed for the first time in 14 years. I was like, God, again, you can do whatever you want with my life. If you just keep revealing the diseases in my heart and keep healing me from them. And ever since that moment, the solitude retreat, my life has been turned upside down in like the craziest, honestly terrifying and wonderful way. In fact, that moment that I just told you about at the cabin was the first domino along a line of long dominoes that even leads to like me being here with you this morning. Because I eventually decided I just got to quit my job at Flatirons Community Church. It's like too closely tied to everything about who I am and my identity. I still teach there once a month. Teaching is the one thing that it felt like God was saying, like, it'd be disobedient if you don't do it. I want you to go do that. So I still teach there once a month, but I'm not on staff anymore. Like, I don't lead any ministries anymore. I don't office with my friends anymore. I don't, sit and have a voice of influence in decision-making meetings anymore. Like, it was like the scene from the movie where the cop gets fired or demoted or whatever. Like, I turned in my weapon, keys, and badge, right? Especially the keys. When I teach there now, I'm locked out in the morning. I have to like wave in the window until a volunteer sees me. I could tell for me that at least for a season, I had to go absolutely cold turkey from the thing that I had tied my identity to, which for me was being on staff at a big church. And it was like God was telling me, hey, I gave you the gift of teaching. You still need to do that. But for the next season, stop trying to be someone important all the time. Stop trying to earn my love by working for me and just find some way to simply rest in being one of my sons. And it's been a trip. I quit my job in April. My family and we've been living in this weird gray area that's somewhere between self and unemployed right now. Like my wife, Allie, started working again to help our family out. I'm doing things here and there to try to make some money. Like, we're financially insecure for the first time in a long time, and it's scary, but at the same time, I wouldn't change a thing. Because even just 2.5 months into this brand new adventure, I can feel that God is slowly but surely starting to heal me. I just had to humble myself. I had to remove the things that I had sought all of my pride in, right? Like stable paycheck that paid the bills, a position of leadership and influence, and long tenured role at a big church. I'd like remove those things and humble myself so I could begin learning the lesson that from this day forward, if the only important thing I ever do is love Allie, love my 3 kids, and passionately chase after Jesus, that's enough. Like, I'm enough. Jesus will continue to love me if that's all I ever do, and he'll continue to reveal broken parts of my life and heal me. For the last year, I have been learning very hands-on the same lesson that Naaman learned. I've been learning that healing always begins with humility. We started this thing, if you remember, I asked a question, and the question is, what does it look like to take a step of faith? And the answer is healing always begins with humility, which means if you want to take a step of faith, then you have got to answer this question honestly. Don't give it a religious answer, the answer you feel like you should. Answer it for real. You have to answer the question of Naaman's servants. Am I passing up an opportunity to be healed just because I'm too proud to humble myself? Because here's the truth. All right, my prayer genuinely is that no one ever has to learn this truth the hard way. But here's the truth. God wants you to grow in faith. Like, he wants you to grow in intimacy, in relationship with him. And so God's plan A is he commands you to humble yourself. Right? That's not the hard truth. That's the wonderful truth. The hard truth is that God has a plan B. What I mean is if you continue to fight against him, continue to try to heal and fix your own life on your own power so that you can get all the credit and glory for it, or so that your skeletons in the closet can stay in the closet and never have to see the light of day, if you refuse to humble yourself, he'll move on to plan B. And God's plan B is he'll just allow you to humiliate yourself. He will. Eventually, if you continue to live in your own pride and ego, after giving you 1,000 opportunities to humble yourself before him, God will eventually stop protecting you from the inevitable consequences of the way that you're living your life. Because maybe that will get your attention. That's Romans 1. Go read it later. He will give you over to your own ways and your own desires, and you will crash and burn, and it will be humiliating. I don't know, of course, what part of your life you're refusing to give to Jesus, because I'm not your Holy Spirit. But my guess is that for some of us, God is speaking up, and he's pointing very clearly to one aspect of your life, and he's going, let it go. Give it to me. Like, humble yourself and give me that part of your life before it drags you to your destruction and your humiliation. I'm just here to encourage you to take that step of faith. Choose humility before you wind up humiliated. There are two totally different things. Only one of them leads to life. A couple examples of what it looks like to choose humility. These are from my personal life and also just after being a pastor for a couple decades. Choosing humility is seeking a marriage counselor. Choosing humiliation is seeking a divorce lawyer. Please let me explain what I mean before you get frustrated or freak out, okay? I know that in certain situations, especially ones in which you were in danger, your divorce was freedom and it was not humiliation. I'm not talking about those unique situations. I'm referring to the countless couples that I've sat down and talked to who are humiliated about their divorce because they didn't want to get divorced. And they just knew that they could have saved their marriage if they had put the work in years ago. They just knew that they didn't put the work in because of pride. Because it takes humility to admit that maybe things aren't as good as they could be, and to admit that you don't know how to fix this relationship on your own. And it takes humility to say, you know what, instead of just like trying to win every single argument, I actually want to find common ground between me and my wife, and I don't know how to do that. I'm not good at that. I need help with that. Like, it takes humility. But if you can't humble yourself and just admit that you're not necessarily Mr. Wonderful yourself, then the clock is ticking. And it's a matter of time until it ends in humiliation. Another example, I know this one from deeply personal experience. Humility is confession. Humiliation is getting caught. It takes humility to come clean on your addictions, on the secrets that you've kept. It hurts and wounds your pride to bring those secrets out into the open. So like the porn addiction that you've kept secret, or the resentment that you've been harboring in your heart, or the money that you've kept hidden from your spouse, or the baggage and trauma from your past that you've told absolutely no one. Like, you could choose to bring those hidden parts of your life out into the open, out into the light. And you could like finally live in freedom from those things. You could choose humility today and over time be healed. Or you just keep doing what you're doing. Keep white knuckling it. Keep your fists clenched around those secrets. Keep the skeletons in your closet. Keep managing your identity and what other people think of you. I'm just warning you, again, from personal experience. That clock is ticking. And you'll get caught. And it'll be humiliating. Listen, if you feel like you haven't taken a step of faith in a while, or you feel like so close to throwing yourself in the deep end with Jesus, you just feel stuck, I'm telling you the culprit is pride. And so ask yourself, am I passing up an opportunity to be healed just because I'm too proud to humble myself? And listen, I know because I've sat in seats like this, I keep learning lessons like this. I know some of us are so close right now, and you know what you need to do. You're just psyching up the courage to do it because you're terrified, right? Like, we know what we need to confess to our spouses or our friends, and we know the secrets we've kept, and we know what we need to stop doing. We know what we need to start doing. We're afraid we're going to lose everything, or people are going to start looking at us differently, or we might even lose people. I'm just asking you the same question Naaman had to ask himself. How desperate are you? How desperate are you for healing? And are you desperate enough to do something crazy, which is choose humility? For a lot of us, we already know what we need to do. I'm just here to encourage you to do it. I'm practically begging you to choose humility before you wind up humiliating yourself. Like, God honors humility every time. He won't let it go to waste. I'm not saying it'll be easy. right? You don't have control over the fallout of doing the right thing. You only have control over doing the right thing. And then you can put all of your confidence and assurance and trust in the fact that Jesus will walk through the fallout with you. He won't let go of you. He won't abandon you. And so humble yourself before you wind up humiliated. For those of us who are so close to knowing what we need to do right now, I'd be honored to close our time together today by praying that prayer from Henry Nouwen over you right now. And so I'd ask that you stand with me and close your eyes. Dear God, we are so afraid to open our clenched fists. Because who are we going to be when we have nothing left to hold on to? And who are we going to be when we stand before you with empty hands? Who are we going to be when we don't even know what to seek our identity in or our pride in? Who are we going to be when the secrets get let out of the closet and out into the open? Who are we going to be with empty hands in front of you? Please, God, gradually help us to open our hands and to realize that we are not what we own. And we are not the secrets that we've kept, and we are not the things that we've held on to in our pride, and we are more than the sum of all of our sin and our baggage and our mistakes and our trauma. Instead, we are what you want to give us, and what you want to give us is love, unconditional, everlasting, healing love. God, I can't say it any more beautifully than that, so God, give us the courage to choose humility, not to be rule followers, not to earn your love, but instead to enjoy the freedom that you promised us, because it is for freedom that Christ set us free, and we believe that. And I pray in the name of the one who set us free, Jesus Christ. Amen.